Mike Tomlin says there's discipline for George Pickens. Won't say what it is, but we talk about, is George Pickens the problem, or is it a bigger problem for the Steelers that is spread across the entire roster? We'll explore that as well as talk about what they need to do with the win now that we know that Mason Rudolph is starting against the Bengals. Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, joined by Jenna Harner. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as your bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. The easiest, most exciting way to play with daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. We're joined, as I said before, by Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, it's almost Christmas time. We're getting our shopping done, but I think there's a lump of coal waiting in the stocking of one George Pickens right now for what all that's been going on this week. And we've talked about it at different points on this show. We didn't consume the entire week with that because we thought there was a lot more to talk about. We previewed the game with James Rapino of Locked On Bengals for the Thursday episode. Go check that out. But we got to address this. So let's go step by step in the timeline of how things have worked out over the past week with George Pickens. Mike Tomlin, in an interview with Bob Labriola on Steelers.com, reveals that, hey, he talked to George Pickens after the Patriots game. They had a conversation, and that they're working on trying to help him mature because he knows he needs to be better, and Tomlin's reminding him of that. Then, of course, in the Colts game, George Pickens, doesn't finish the block on the Jaylen Warren play, has an interception, where that goes over his head, or that he didn't, maybe win a jump ball for. Not the best effort. Is the source of criticism. And then when we speak to him on Tuesday in the Steelers locker room, George Pickens says, that, well, I didn't meet with Tomlin after the Patriots game, or after the Colts game, so I'm not, when we asked him about that meeting, so he's like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And then that becomes a spiraling social media fire as people think that he meant that Mike Tomlin never talked to him. So people are calling Mike Tomlin a liar. Turns out George Pickens clarified, and I was there, so I was the person who was able to clarify this. No, he's saying he met with him after the Patriots game. He just didn't meet with him after the Colts game at that point. And Mike Tomlin revealed, hey, I met with him on Wednesday, and we talked about it. And in fact, on Wednesday, he had a press conference that Mike Tomlin sat with the reporters and said, it's part of an ongoing education that they're giving him. And quote, he's like, when you're winning and doing your jobs, a lot of attention on things are things like that. But when you're not doing the job and you're losing, you better keep your damn mouth shut and understand that attracts a certain type of attention as well. And usually that's a vulture-like attention. And Tomlin went on to talk about Pickens and say, like, look, like, he told him the way that he's dealing with the media is unacceptable. It's not helping his situation. It's not helping the Steelers situation. And that's where I think that there's a lot of things going here. So now the bigger question right now is, Jenna, some people are saying that George Pickens is the entire Steelers roster, that everyone on the team is acting this way, or that it's rampant throughout the team. I think maybe you can point to Deontay Johnson as the only other really malcontent, but I don't think that George Pickens is some representative of an entire team problem, that everyone is just acting out of character all the time.
No, and I really think that you can kind of pinpoint it's three players on offense who have expressed frustrations in a way that is causing a lot of, stir and emotion, and people are talking about storylines. I mean, realistically, in that locker room, George Pickens and everything surrounding him, Deontay Johnson a little bit, although I do want to, as sometimes frustrating as things are, I want to give Johnson some credit, because after the Colts game, did not want to talk in that locker room, but eventually turned around and said, all right, I'll face you guys. I'll answer some questions. I'll deal with it. I mean, it's also part of their job and it's in the contract, but you also, on the flip side, have guys like Najee Harris who look at you and say, yeah, no, I'm not talking today, and walk out of the locker room after a loss when there needs to be accountability. So this is not, in our eyes, based on what we're seeing, and I guess my opinion, I don't believe this is a massive team-wide Mike Tomlin has lost the locker room type thing. There's a couple players that there can be a lot of scrutiny about, and deservedly so, but you have guys like Alex Highsmith, who we're talking to after the Colts game, in the locker room. And I'm asking him, I forget exactly what question I asked him, but he took it, answered it and then took it a totally different tangent and said, I asked him how confident he was that this group is going to be able to snap this losing skid, turn things around towards the end of the season, and hopefully help them find a way to win and make it into the playoffs. And he was saying, I'm confident, but then he went on this whole thing and he's like, every single guy in this locker room has to look themselves in the mirror right now.
Yeah.
And everyone needs to take accountability. He's like, I need to do it for myself. I need to look and see where I can be better, where this. He's like, but every guy in the locker room has to do that. And that's something we've heard from TJ Watt and from Cam Hayward. And I think this all goes back to there's a big void on leadership on offense right now in terms of leadership. I don't think there's this clear cut. And I know you and I have talked about this last week. There's not this one person that's this offensive leader, because that was Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett has been injured, and yes, he's been around and things like that, but it's, not the same as having a guy on the field every single time. And then you have a young offense. So to me, this is not a big locker room wide thing that a lot of people have been made it out to be. This is George Pickens dealing with some immaturity, Najee Harris dealing with some immaturity.
I agree.
Johnson dealing with some immaturity, but also at the same time, still talking with us, still taking ownership and accountability. Because again, remember the whole, we're talking about like the plays that have been under scrutiny when Deontay did nothing on the fumble. And was that the last Bengals game?
That was the last Bengals game. Yep.
Yeah. I was like, I knew it was an AFC North orange team. I wasn't sure that's where my brain's going. But after that happened, Mike Tomlin that week said, hey, take it up with Deontay. He owes you an explanation. We took it up with Deontay, and he said, hey, I apologize to my team. I got up in front of this, took accountability, and moved on. And what have we done from that situation? We have moved on. But the reason we have not is because George Pickens does not do that. And he's young. And not that it's a pass or an excuse or anything, but he's a work in progress. As Tomlin said, this is a young guy who hasn't dealt with a lot of adversity when it comes to the game of football and losing in the way that the Steelers have been losing. And it's showing. And there's, again, it's not, Tomlin said yesterday or Wednesday, it's a continual kind of process here. It's not just a one conversation, fix it, it's done. It's, they're having multiple conversations like this with George Pickens. And for Tomlin to give us that insight too, that's something we don't usually get from him.
Yeah, it's something we don't. He protects the locker room, and in the sense that he'll go after the locker room. And TJ Watt even said he's been extremely dynamic in a lot of these meetings. He's been putting a lot of effort into motivating guys. And he said he's like the things that Mike Tomlin's been doing has and that's TJ Watt, the best defensive player in the NFL, the undisputed best player on this football team, and a guy that knows what it means to lead, know what it means to win. And he's even saying like this, this guy is doing everything he can. I don't think it's like a widespread thing where everyone's not hearing the message. I think that George Pickens is having a hard time accepting the message because he's having a hard time taking accountability for himself. And that's not, and as Alan Saunders and I discussed on our Tuesday episode, that's not something that you can change as a coach. That's something you can challenge him to get past. And if he doesn't, that's on him. And then you got to move on. And that's where I'll ask you this, Jenna. Mike Tomlin says he's not going to bench George Pickens. Is that a mistake, or is that just kind of what it is right now because the Steelers don't have other receivers?
I think it's kind of a combination of both, in my opinion. I mean, I guarantee you what we'll see happen is Pickens won't be announced as a starter, and that'll satisfy whoever.
They did that. They did it earlier this year.
They did. And I think that will satisfy whoever needs to be. I guarantee you we'll see Najee and Jaylen Warren both be announced as starters, and George Pickens won't be announced as a starter. And how much does that really get through to him? I don't know. The tough thing here is that, you just need this whole offense to play better. And the only way that George Pickens can play better is to be out there playing and showing the effort. Now, will he? What these conversations did, I don't know. And that'll be left to be said when we see this team take the field and what product they put out on display on Saturday against the Bengals. But it's just one of those things he's almost in a terrible situation because you can't bench this guy because you need him, but also you need him to understand the message, and you should. But also too, would benching George Pickens get it through his head? how much would it really help?
How
I
much
don't
would it?
know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think one thing maybe they could try, make him play some special teams. Make him play some kickoff or some punt return and just be like, you know what, you're going to do some dirty work that you got to focus on to tack it on here, and that'll be part of his lesson. I mean, he doesn't learn from it. If he doesn't learn from it, he doesn't learn from it. You got to move on. There's guys all across the NFL that they deal with it. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs with Kadarius Toney and not lining up and then not taking responsibility afterwards, saying that, oh, the referee was supposed to warn me about stuff, and the Chiefs even crying about it afterwards. Like, there are moments like that everywhere. It's just about, you got to keep challenging guys to rise above it and to show that professionalism. And if they don't, you either got to move on or find someone else that can challenge them on the team. And, real quickly here before we move on, because we got to get to the next segment, but I think part of another problem here is, like you said, the lack of leadership on offense. Najee Harris is supposed to be a leader right now. And when I asked him about being a leading voice, he didn't like the question. He rejected it. And I'm like, buddy, like, that's like, and listen, I've been one of the people that said, like, he's not the biggest fault for the lack of running production most of the time. There's sometimes he picks the run hole, but most of the time it's because the offensive line ain't blocking and no one's scared of the Steelers passing game. No one has been scared of the Steelers passing game since they drafted Najee Harris. But he is supposed to be the guy on offense that challenges people around him. That is the guy that leads the room when Kenny Pickett isn't leading the room. And he's not doing that right now. And that, to me, is a very bad sign for Najee Harris, and hurts. If you're not producing numbers-wise as a first-round pick, you better be producing leader-wise. And right now, he's not.
Yeah, no, we're not seeing that at all. And this kind of goes back. I know we've had this conversation, I feel like, how many times in the last couple of weeks here, but it goes back to when Mitch was going to start 2 weeks ago against the Patriots. And I'm talking to Najee and I'm asking him, how do you describe Mitch Trubisky's leadership? And he looks at me angrily and says, it's fine, I guess. And I said, well, how is he as a leader? Like, how would you describe him? And he goes, vocal, I guess. Like, you were a guy that was a co-captain with this guy last year. So anybody knows it better. And I know I went on this rant a week ago because it's still relevant here. But, Najee has not wanted to talk about leadership this year, and whether that's a byproduct of his frustrations of not being a captain, but also, in my opinion, too, and again, this is just kind of spitballing, but if you are so frustrated about not being a captain, you should prove your leadership and show why you should have been one. Exactly. And especially in moments like this where, hey, your quarterback's hurt, people are looking to you and you're not doing it in that way. Like, I think, again, that kind of goes into the bigger thing. It's not a locker room wide thing, but there's a couple guys that aren't taking accountability, that aren't stepping into the leadership roles that you expect them to step into. And that's part of the reason why this team is where they are right now.
Absolutely. We'll talk about Mason Rudolph real quick and get to all of our picks for the week here on the Locked On Steelers podcast right after this break. Chris, Carter, Jenna Harner, stick with us. We got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you that you can order any food that you want, whether it's from the grocery store or the restaurant, from DoorDash, and it gets delivered right to your door really, really quickly. It's a great way to get ready for the game. If you're sitting at home watching the game, you can't make it out, it's the best way to fill up on an empty stomach. You can get pizza, wing, burgers, pop, whatever you want, Italian food, Chinese food, whatever kind of food you want, you can get it right to your door. The one thing that I always want is, like, man, sometimes I want a nice pepperoni pizza just delivered right to my door. I got a pizza. It's funny. I got a Pizza Hut like 2 minutes away from me, Jenna, but I'll still DoorDash it because they'll get it there faster than me driving there and asking for it. I get it, and that's the thing. DoorDash will get your favorites all to your door. And right now, you can get 50% off up to a $10 in value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED23. Subject to change, terms and conditions apply. And when you sign up today, you can get a Dash Pass membership that makes sure that you're saving on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders. I have a Dash Pass membership, and it is super helpful. So get on DoorDash today, and don't forget, when you sign up, you get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 and more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED23. Subject to change, terms and conditions apply. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Jenna Harner talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers. Before we get to our picks, we got to talk about the news. Kenny Pickett is officially out for the game. Mike Tomlin announced that. So now Mason Rudolph is definitely the starter. He's been practicing all week. Jenna, how do you think this team is going to handle Mason Rudolph being the starter? Because he's the third string guy. He's been the longest tenured here, but there's been a reason he's been the third string.
Yeah, I know a lot of fans are looking forward to seeing this and being like, oh, this is going to be a spark. This is going to be it. I want to keep reminding people Mason Rudolph lost his starting job in 2019 to a duck collar the Steelers brought in off the streets. And no disrespect to Duck, because I was not here in Pittsburgh. It was on the flip side, because I remember the game against the Bills. It was Sunday Night Football. Whoever won that game was going to make it into the playoffs. And I was actually covering that game for my station in Buffalo at the time. And just seeing the dynamics now, it was so funny to go back and watch that. But Mason Rudolph lost his job to a duck collar the Steelers brought in off the streets. Like, this isn't going to, he's been a third quarterback on this team for a reason. I don't think that there's going to be this magical, crazy spark. Hey, I'm here for it. I would love, all the Christmas puns. Rudolph saves Christmas. You can go with a lot of things there. But I think the reality is not a whole lot is going to change here with the Steelers offense. I am going to be really intrigued, though, to see his connection with Diontae Johnson, because I think that that's probably one of the only bright spots that we're really going to see, because the two of them, when Rudolph was starting in 2019, and that I believe was Johnson's rookie year.
Yes, it was.
The two had a really, really, really solid connection. So I'm really going to be interested to seeing that. But I don't think it's all of a sudden going to be like, wow, the Steelers offense put up 30-something points and they ran the ball for, 170 yards and they surpassed 400 yards. I just don't see that happening here. But, I mean, there's clearly a reason this team had to make a change, had to create a spark, and it's going to be a rough one.
It's going to be a rough one. Let's get to the picks. We'll get to our predictions for Steelers Bengals in a bit here. But first, of course, we got to talk about all of our picks. We have the Locked On Steelers Pick'em League. And right now, Jenna Harner, you are tied for 9th place with 146 correct picks. Crazy Eye still in first place with 150 correct picks. I am way far back in 100th place with 134 correct picks. And as always, the odds, lines, and ends that we bring you here are from FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. So let's get to some of these. We're not going to do all the picks this week because we had to talk a lot of different things early in the show. So I'm going to talk about some key games that you could be looking at this weekend. One that all Steelers fans will be looking at on Sunday is the Browns at the Texans. This is a huge game for the Steelers playoff chances if they were to beat the Bengals. The Browns are 2.5-point road favorites. The Texans dealing with lots of injuries, and right now I think that they're trying to figure out if CJ Stroud will even come back at all. Right now he's likely not to play in this game, which could be rough, but the Browns have not been a good road team this year. So this could be a game where the Texans find a way to survive, but I'm taking the Browns to win on the road. I think that CJ Stroud not being there, the Texans have done a remarkable job getting to where they are, but I think Cleveland finds a way to win.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think if CJ Stroud is playing this game and he's as healthy as he can be at this point in the season, minus the concussion side of things, I think the Texans have a big chance. But the reality is that the Browns just have a better offense right now with the absence of CJ Stroud. I mean, so I'm going with Cincinnati or Cleveland. Jeez Louise. I'm going with Cleveland, the Cleveland Browns.
The Jaguars play the Buccaneers in Tampa. The Buccaneers are 2.5-point home favorites here. I'm taking the Buccaneers here, particularly because I haven't liked what I've seen out of the Jaguars, and Baker Mayfield's playing well. And I think that defensive front, if they can get after Trevor Lawrence, it'll make life hard on him. And I think they'll create some turnovers. And I think that the Buccaneers offense will do enough to this Jaguars defense that hasn't been looked too great lately.
Yeah, don't let Baker Mayfield get hot, because he is on a roll right here. Last week, he had a phenomenal performance, and I think that continues. I know there's questions, obviously, if Trevor Lawrence is going to play or not, but I think the Bucs, to me, this feels like a game they should win. They have a little bit of that home field advantage. I think it's going to be good.
Lions at Vikings. Lions are just 3-point favorites on the road facing Minnesota right now. Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson working with Nick Mullins and finding some success. They came up short last week, but you saw some stuff going on there. I'm taking the Lions, but should we be on upset alert here, Jenna?
I'm going with the Lions too, but I feel the same way. This does feel like a game that they could lose, but I think the reality is the Lions are just a better team. I think they have a lot more going for them. Obviously, a lot at stake, and I think a lot of fans are kind of like, okay, this is the Lions' time. So I'm going with Detroit, but would not be surprised if Minnesota makes this way closer than it should be.
Going to the game that everyone's going to be tuning into on Sunday, the Cowboys at the Dolphins. The Dolphins are 1.5-point favorites at home. I have gone back and forth on this pick all week. I am not sure. I don't believe it. I don't believe in either team, but then I do believe in both teams. And I'm like, what is even this? I'm taking the Dolphins because they're at home. I think the Cowboys lost brutally to the Bills and looked terrible doing so. But here's the thing. The Dolphins have also lost to the Bills and not looked good as well this year. So I'm taking Miami, but man, I'm skeptical.
I don't have a lot of belief in either of these teams because neither of these teams can win against good teams, and they're both record-wise good, but can they beat a good team? Like, whoever's going to win this might dispel a little bit of those, that notion that surrounds them here. I'm going with Dallas just because I think what we saw from Dak in Buffalo, kind of a little bit of an anomaly. It's not what we've seen from him or that offense at all this season. But at the same time, their defense got absolutely gashed by the run. And what is one of the things the Dolphins do really well? Not only do they have explosive plays with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they run the ball really well. But I think this is a really good, really close game. I like Dallas a little bit more. And as someone in the NFC East, and as an NFC East fan, Giants fan, that pains me to say that.
Nah, dang. I know that hurts your heart and soul. We won't make you pick Eagles versus Giants. We won't do that to you.
The Eagles are going to murder the Giants. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants came back and won that game the way we've seen Philly play. And
a Christmas miracle. It'd be Christmas afternoon, I believe that game is. So,
and one little point. I know we're short on time, but I got to be quick. One little point here. Did anybody talk about the fact that Jalen Hurts was saying that some of his teammates aren't bought in because, hey, that happens other places?
I wonder if the Eagles are 0-3 this month, just like the Steelers are. That's a very good point there, Jenna Harner. I just wonder, it's so funny how things are only a problem in Pittsburgh and not acknowledged like, hey, a lot of teams are dealing with this kind of stuff. But let's get to the game of the week here as far as the nation is concerned. Christmas evening, everyone is going to be tuning in for the Ravens at the Niners. The Niners are 5.5-point favorites. I'm taking the Niners, but man, Baltimore intrigues me with the way Lamar Jackson has continued to fight through things. I just think the Niners are just a better constructed team right now, and they will have enough advantages to poke at the Ravens in different ways.
This feels like the Niners win by a field goal. This is going to be a close, awesome game. I'm so excited to watch a game with really solid offense in it. I am here for this matchup, but I just think, like you said, kind of the Niners roster is just a little bit better, a little bit better constructed. But the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, and what he's done in this new look offense has just been, you see him not have to take on the burden as much. And I think that also speaks to why he's the only healthy starting quarterback in the AFC North right now. There's a reason behind that. So I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I just think the Niners are just a little bit better, but I do think this may also be potentially a Super Bowl preview.
It very well could be. We'll get to Steelers Bengals in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Our final look at how this game will go in just a minute. Stay tuned. We got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of players, including pros and sharks, and trying to guess, basically hit the lottery with the perfect lineup every week, all you have to do is find 2 to 6 players that you think you have a beat on their day and how they're going to perform in fantasy, and then just say, look at the projections that PrizePicks give you, and just say they'll get more or less than that projection. It's that easy. PrizePicks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. And with basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball with what's called the Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, if in their next games you think LeBron James and Travis Kelce will combine for more than 10.5 combined 3-pointers made in receptions, you could guess more on PrizePicks, and you can watch your winnings start to roll in. And PrizePicks has the reboot policy, which makes your entry stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and college 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. That's why you got to download the PrizePicks app right now, or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports today. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. When you get there, use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and then code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. She's Jenna Harner. We have picked some of the bigger games this week. Let's look at Steelers Bengals, which happens Saturday, Christmas Eve, 4:31 kickoff time. The Bengals are 2.5-point favorites coming into Pittsburgh. The Steelers beat them earlier this season. It does feel like this is a make or break game for either team's playoff hopes when you look at how things shake out. We were talking with James Rapine of Locked On Bengals. He said basically the Bengals, their playoff calculator, if they win, they have over 50% of a chance to make the playoffs. If they lose, it's less than 10%. And I haven't looked at the Steelers calculator, but I imagine it's very similar. The Steelers cannot get eliminated this weekend, but they could put them in the position to be eliminated in week 17 next week. So with that being said, this is a must-win game. That we know Mason Rudolph starting. We know Cam Hayward's going to be able to play. We also know, though, that Trenton Thompson can't go. So that means the Steelers will be missing Minkah Fitzpatrick, Demonte KZ, Keanu Neal, and Trenton Thompson, their top 4 safeties. Elijah Riley, their 5th safety, who's been on injured reserve, it might be able to come back, but he's questionable to play in this game. So that means if Elijah Riley can't go, if he can go, he's a practice squad guy who basically would just be filling in after not playing for several months. But then even if he can't go, it's Patrick Peterson and Miles Killebrew back there at safety, or Eric Rowe, excuse me. Eric Rowe will be filling in next to Patrick Peterson at safety. And that's a lot of injuries to account for there. And this is a Bengals team. They're dealing with injuries. Jamar Chase is out. Joe Burrow's been out. But I think you can get away with 1 or 2 guys being missing from your starting lineup versus an entire position being completely depleted. And that's where I think the Bengals have a major advantage in this contest.
And that's my exact reason why I'm choosing the Bengals to win this game. And I know Steelers fans would be like, what are you doing? The Cincinnati and Jake Browning have been lighting it up. Browning has been playing phenomenal football, and he has been on fire. And I think that continues because, especially again, the Steelers are going to be without people in the middle of the field defensively, really.
Yep.
We know obviously the loss of the guys, the middle linebackers, and that's been a tough situation too. But you're also going to be down. Like, there was a reason the Colts were able to do what they did. And yes, part of that was, Steelers trying to move people in and out and schematics and stuff like that. But there's the reason why Gardner Minshew was able to move the ball the way that he did last week. I just think it's going to be kind of the perfect opportunity for Cincinnati to kind of keep things going. These are 2 teams trending, in my opinion, in different directions. The Bengals going this way, the Steelers going this way. So yeah. I just think no matter how well Mason Rudolph plays, no matter, these games are always close too, but I realistically think this is a game that the Steelers just are playing a team that's a better team than them.
Literally, you mean the different directions. After the Steelers beat the Bengals about a month ago, yep, the Bengals have gone 3-0. The Steelers have gone 0-3. That is literally the different directions that they've gone in. But here's another crazy part of this. If the Bengals win this game, it's their first division win of the season. They haven't beaten a single AFC North opponent yet, and that is just so bizarre to me with the situation that they've been in this year. I agree with you. I'm picking the Bengals. We'll give our score predictions. I can't see the Steelers finding a way to get this done unless they rope it together. They find some crazy way to pull off a gutsy win, and they've done that before under Mike Tomlin. They've done that before for the past several years. But they were supposed to do that against the Colts. They were supposed to do that against the Patriots. They were supposed to do that against the Cardinals. Those 3 losses are just so tough to get over for me and pick them to win this game. I may be wrong. I may be counting them out, but I have a hard time seeing with all the injuries and with the momentum that they've been on. And now you're down to your 3rd string quarterback and you're hoping Mason Rudolph delivers for you. Mason might get you a couple big throws. He might make a couple big plays, but that might have been good enough to win if this defense was even remotely healthy.
Yes.
And then I think if the defense was at its health standpoint that it was against the Bengals the first time, this would be, I'd be picking differently because the Steelers would have their safeties, right? Like they'd be in it. And I think that could be something that would go there in their favor. But as it stands right now, I can't pick them to play. The one way, the slim path is the path that we've talked about for years, that the Steelers have to win their games now. They have to run the ball. They have to block well. They have to dominate the line of scrimmage, which maybe they can. DJ Reader, their top defensive tackle for the Bengals, is out as well for this game. I think he's out for the season. That could be an advantage to the Steelers, but the offensive line, it doesn't matter who they're blocking. They've been stinking the last couple of weeks, and that has to improve. If they can block well, the Steelers' defensive front can dominate, and the secondary and linebackers just don't give up the big play, the Steelers can win this game. But you just notice I said about 4 ifs in about three seconds.
And that's exactly what it is. It's just there's too many things that have to go right for the Steelers that we have not seen go right throughout either the majority of the season or at least definitely in this last stretch of 3 losses here, that just I can't be confident in this team right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna agree with that notion. What is your final score prediction, and how do we get there?
Well, I'm going 27-17 Bengals. Cincinnati in this 3-game win streak has 27 points is the fewest that they have scored. And yes, they came in overtime against the Vikings last week, but this offense has been really, really, really high powered. I think we see this game go exactly how we've seen a lot of Steelers games go. Cincinnati starts with the ball. They drive down. They get a field goal. Steelers start with the ball. They go 3 and out. Cincinnati drives down the field, scores a touchdown. Steelers find themselves down 10-0, have to claw out of a hole that they can't claw themselves out of. So I think that's unfortunately just the reality of what we're going to see. I would like to be proven wrong. I really would. But again, there's been too much in this one direction that we've seen, especially from this team in this last 3 games, that just does not give me confidence.
See, I think it's going to go a little differently. I actually think the Steelers will come out strong to start the game, and they'll keep this close. And I even think that Mason Rudolph will lead like a 4th quarter drive that gets him a lead at the end of the game. And that'll be the pace for how they've played at some of their best times this year.
Yeah.
But the difference will be that the Steelers defense won't have the answers that it's had this year on the field for the most part. They'll give up a late last minute drive to Jake Browning. He'll either get in field goal range or get a touchdown. I have the Bengals winning 19-16, a close one, but one that I think that the Steelers do drop, and it would be a rough spot for them to do so, because then they would fall to 7-8, and they would be going on the road for their final 2 games against the Seahawks and the Ravens. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's always great to have you. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Well, thank you for having me. As always, happy holidays. Merry Christmas to everybody. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner 11, Instagram, Jenna_Harner, locally here on WPXI. Steelers fans, I know so many of you are like, we don't want to watch this football game, but for those who do, it is on Channel 11, WPXI locally. So if you're in the Pittsburgh television market and you get WPXI, it's on our station this week. We have pregame show, postgame show. We'll be talking about everything. We'll take you inside the locker room too to see just how these guys are doing after this win or loss. So tune in.
Absolutely. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll be back Saturday night after the game, Christmas Eve, getting you ready for Christmas Eve, getting you ready for all the reactions to this game. We'll see you here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.